The Lexus RX is entering a new generation for the 2023 model year, and it now has a performance trim called the 500h. But does it actually make sense to having a high-performance version of the Lexus RX? Let's go for a drive and find out. The first thing that you need to know about the new Lexus RX is that it no longer has the V6. It's replaced by 4-cylinder engines. This 500h has a 2.4-liter turbo 4-cylinder. The other thing you need to know is that although this 500h is a hybrid, it's not meant to be the most fuel-efficient hybrid. There's another version of the Lexus RX called the 350h, and that one is supposed to be the most fuel-efficient version. This hybrid powertrain is more about power. But even though fuel economy is not the focus of this car, it does still get some pretty decent numbers. Officially, it is rated for 8.7 liters per 100 kilometers in a city and 8.4 liters per 100 kilometers on a highway. During the past 5 days that I've been driving this car, I haven't been able to average those numbers specifically, but I am averaging about 8.8, 8.9 liters per 100 kilometers, so not too bad for something with this much power and this much weight. This hybrid powertrain operates almost the same way as pretty much every other Toyota/Lexus hybrid power system out there. So when you set off from a stop, the engine and the electric motors provide power to get you up to speed, say in a city environment, and then once you are up to speed, the engine shuts off periodically and you run on electricity. However, what I have noticed is that when you drive above 65-ish kilometers an hour, this hybrid powertrain doesn't really like to provide EV-only driving. So when you're on a highway and you lift your foot off the throttle pedal, in most other EVs, the engine will shut off and you'll see that little green EV symbol on the dashboard. But in this one, if you lift your foot off the throttle pedal and just coast, the engine remains on. But again, below 65-ish kilometers an hour, then it behaves just like any other hybrid system. However, as I said earlier, this hybrid system is all about power, and it has quite a bit of it. The engine on its own produces about 270 or 275 horsepower, but with the aid of the electric motors, it produces a total output of 366 horsepower and 406 pound-feet of torque. That's good enough for a 0 to 100 kilometer an hour time of 5.9 seconds, according to Lexus. And just like every other hybrid out there, the electric motors provide their instant torque while the engine builds up RPMs and the turbocharger spools up to provide the bulk of the power. Unlike other hybrids, this 2.4-liter engine is paired with a 6-speed automatic transmission. It is not an eCVT, but the RX 350h does have an eCVT. This 6-speed is a little on the slow side when you decide to take over shifting with the paddle shifters, but it is unbelievably smooth. Even in sport mode and when you take over shifting duties, the shifts are pretty much imperceivable. They are that smooth. I guess the electric motors really do help in ironing out those hard shifts. When you're just driving around town, again, seamless shifts, very smooth, you don't feel them. The RX500h utilizes big 15.7-inch two-piece front rotors that are clamped down by 6-piston brake calipers. Such big brakes are required when 2 tons of mass is moving so quickly. Regen braking helps to slow down the SUV as well, but it does not have any different modes that you can select from. There is a bit more force in the sport mode, but you won't be saving much fuel if you choose to remain in that drive mode. The brake pedal is linear and easy to modulate for smooth stops, while the brake pads do not have an overly aggressive initial bite. Though this is touted as a higher performance Lexus, it doesn't feel that way when driving through corners. The weight of this SUV is hard to ignore, and the all-season tires can't cope with it. Push too hard through corner, and you'll hear them scream in agony. Additionally, the steering doesn't provide as much feedback as that of the BMW X3 M40i, for example. Having said that, it is very responsive and direct. Additionally, the RX500h is equipped with rear-wheel steering, which makes slow-speed maneuvering a lot easier. All in all, you get the feeling that this SUV is more happy to be blasting down a highway or be in gridlock traffic, rather than a twisty back road. The RX500h is as smooth as a Lexus should be. The transition from electric to gasoline is barely noticeable, with the vibrations of the 2.4-liter engine being well isolated from the cabin. There is some augmented engine noise being played through the audio system, but it doesn't sound too bad in my opinion. Road and wind noise are kept in check while driving on highways with minimal intrusion. The interior of the new Lexus RX is a welcome update over the previous generation. It looks much more modern and it doesn't feel quite as cluttered as the last generation did because there are far fewer buttons. Now that's a good or a bad thing depending on who you are. I personally do like having buttons for each individual function, but for the most part, this interior is pretty straightforward and easy to use. However, this new infotainment system and all of its controls do have a few annoying things. So for example, if you want to change the drive modes, this new RX doesn't have a dedicated button or a dedicated knob to do so really quickly. You have to click on this button on the touchscreen, and then if the different drive modes is not in the frequently used section, then you have to swipe and then select your drive mode. It's a bit annoying, especially considering that the Lexus NX that I drove last week did have its own physical knob for changing the drive modes. It was much faster and much more straightforward. Also, this particular Lexus RX does have the subscription enabled for the navigation system, the native navigation system that is. It does allow for wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto, and I haven't had any issues in connectivity with Android Auto. But getting back to this native navigation system, it reminds me a lot of Google Maps. So it's very easy to read, it tells you traffic, and it's just really straightforward. However, every time that you move away from the navigation system, so for example, if you want to change the audio station and then you go back to it, the map settings reset. So now it's back to 2D mode and about 300 meters in zoom, whereas I normally like to have it in 3D mode and about 200 meters of zoom. It's a little thing, but it gets annoying after a while every time that you switch between pages. I'm sure that Lexus can update this through over-the-air updates to make it so that every time that you move away, it always remembers your map settings. But again, small little minor detail. In terms of interior space, there is more than enough for somebody as tall as myself at 6'4". I have plenty of legroom. The materials next to my knees are nice and soft, and I have plenty of headroom. This seat is in its lowest position, but I still have excellent visibility out the front, out the side, and even out the back. And this particular Lexus RX is available with the rear camera mirror, so you just flip it up and it gives you an unobstructed view out the back. So all in all, really nice materials, simpler to use infotainment system, not as cluttered, and just a really nice place to be in. So now let's go check out the back seats. This new generation of the Lexus RX is no longer available with a third row, so the second row passengers have a pretty decent amount of space, especially when it comes to legroom. So behind my tall 6'4" driving position, my knees are barely touching the back of the front seat, and I have plenty of space for my feet as well. Headroom is a bit more on the tight side. My hair is brushing up against the headliner, but I can create more headroom for myself if I recline the power rear seats. So now my head is not touching the headliner. This particular Lexus RX is available with heated and ventilated outboard seats, and you have your own separate climate zone, and the hump in the center is pretty shallow. All in all, again, pretty nice place to be in. The trunk can accommodate 838 liters behind the second row seats and 1,308 liters with the 40-20-40 split power fold seats in the down position. Underneath the floor, you'll find the jack and a spare wheel. The 2023 Lexus RX500h is not a cheap SUV to purchase or lease, with a starting price of almost $80,000 Canadian. Add on the F Sport Performance 3 package and that number grows to $85,600 Canadian. In the United States, you get to choose the different options separately. At least for that money, the SUV is fully loaded and it's not missing anything. There are heated and ventilated seats in all four corners. The large panoramic sunroof lets in a lot of light. The surround view cameras can display an invisible car so that you can see what's under it. There's also the rear camera mirror that I mentioned earlier for an unobstructed view out the back. There's also a large head-up display and a wireless charging pad, to name a few. Like the interior, the exterior styling has evolved to reflect the modern-day Lexus design language. The hourglass grille is still there, but it now blends into the hood. The LED lights look sharper than ever, and the tail lamps blend into a light bar that stretches the width of the car. This 500h may be the performance version of the RX, but it doesn't look all that different from the regular RX 350. And finally, the 2023 Lexus RX500h is covered by a 4-year 60,000 kilometer new vehicle, a 6-year 110,000 kilometer powertrain, and an 8-year 160,000 kilometer hybrid component warranty here in Canada. So back to the original question that I asked at the start of the video. Does it make sense to have a high-performance Lexus RX? Well, compared to something like the BMW X3 M40i or the Mercedes GLC 43 AMG, this one doesn't drive quite as well as those two crossover SUVs. It's more in line with something like the Genesis GV70 with the twin-turbo V6 or the Acura MDX Type S. But regardless, this new generation of the RX is a lot better to drive than the previous generation. It doesn't feel like a sofa with wheels on it. Plus, it still retains the Lexus quality and the Lexus comfort that it's known for. If you'd like to know more about this new RX, I have a written review of it with a few more details about it over on my website. You can find that link in the video description or click on the pop-up banner right up here. And as always, I will see you in the next car or truck or most likely another SUV. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching and see you next time.